So we have 2 more days left of this Christmas break, winter break. How are you feeling, Chris?
I'm okay. I'm good. I still hold to I my belief that I transition well. And so someone else was asking me about that, something similar over the break. I think it was maybe at my son's birthday party. And that was the weekend just before we left for the break. And they're like, you may have had this moment too. So I think I told you before about the new neighbors that moved in on the street. So they have two sons that were invited to Jake's birthday and start actually trading kind of credentials. What do you do? What do you do? Dude works for the RCMP, which is really cool. I've never met anyone before that works for the RCMP. And I did the following, like, okay, what do you do? And he takes this breath, and I felt like he really looked into my eyes deeply. He goes, yeah, I'm in surveillance. And I have to admit, I had one moment like, whoa, that's kind of freaky to me. I wondered, have you ever heard the so I mean, I can't imagine the emotional response that someone would have if when I tell them I'm a teacher. Like I can't go there anymore. But I think it's one of those jobs that when you tell somebody about it, they have an instant emotional response about it. And there's some jobs that kind of exist in that space. Oh, I'm a I'm a stunt person, or oh yeah, I raise llamas. Like it has kind of like a certain cachet about it that you have an automatic response. Unlike, yeah, I work for a bank. Nothing wrong with working for a bank. I think, when someone tells you they're a cop or in law enforcement, you have an automatic kind of response. Like I had a little bit of a mental check, like, oh, he's in surveillance. Like he only lives like 4 doors down from me. Like, am I being surveilled? Like literally, I automatically put myself like into almost like this guilty frame. Like I don't have anything to hide, yo. And you did bring your kid to my kid's birthday, so I must have checked out. Okay. I don't think I told you this story. So way back in the day, maybe this is where I get my nerves from. Way back in the day when I was leaving university, and I decided that in order to leave university well, I needed to go traveling. I've told you this part, I think, about how I got a Greyhound bus pass, and I got on a bus and I decided to kind of just go across Canada, stay in youth hostels. No, didn't mention that one. So I didn't make any real secret of it to any of my friends, but I wasn't advertising. Like I wasn't pushing it out there. I told people, yeah, I'm going to be leaving and I'm going to go on. I don't know if I might stay out west. I don't know. I might stay somewhere along the way. I think I had told you the story about me staying out west and doing snowboard instruction. So that's what I ended up doing after this. I stayed in Jasper, Alberta. But before that, I had my bus ticket. And I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days before I was about to leave. So I was just wrapping stuff up, right? Kind of double checking my backpack, all those sort of last minute things. I had a couple more shifts at the restaurant I was working at. And she was a colleague in the department I was in. She said, do you mind if I come with you? I was like, it was completely out of the blue. Yeah, I'm sure. Her name's Christy. I was like, sure. I said, go get your bus ticket. Like she knew everything about the trip. She knew everything about what I was doing. So I wouldn't say she was a close friend, but let's say in circles of friends, somehow she had heard about my plan and she had all the details. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like go get it's your ticket. You can travel on the bus with me. And she's like, yeah, that's kind of cool. Like staying in youth hostels. And I was like, okay, cool. We're going to go see Canada. Let's go do it. So I find out, so we're about, let's say 2 weeks into our travels, we're somewhere in Saskatchewan, and she drops that, so we're sitting a bunch of other different travelers and we're sort of just shooting the breeze. And she mentions that her dad is RCMP and in surveillance, and that he had me checked out before, because we were talking about all the preparation to going traveling. She said, yeah, my dad checked you out. I was like, oh, and you just kind of go, that's kind of interesting. She goes, yeah, he's RCMP. I'm like, oh, so kind of, you can go a little bit deeper, I believe, if you are RCMP and you decide to check somebody out. So flash forward, me at this kids party, and my neighbor says, yeah, I work for RCMP. It's like, ooh, RCMP. And I didn't know what memory I was having, but I think I was tripping back to that conversation with Christy, because then he says, yeah, and I'm in surveillance. I was like, ooh. I guess I checked out a second time, which is good. I don't even know how I got onto that. How did we get onto
that? How did we get onto that? I was asking how you're doing with the transition back to school. You said good with transitions. And then we went down that road. I don't know exactly.
I don't even know. I feel like I should try and connect the dots for that.
But I got a great story, if you don't mind me adding a layer to the RCMP thing.
Do it.
So me and my buddies graduate from our undergraduate degree, and I go to teachers college, and one of my close friends decides to apply to like 100 police forces. Okay. And he's from Toronto. So he applies to the Ottawa Police, Toronto Police, OPP, RCMP. So I'm in North Bay, and it's like, I don't know, October or something, and I get a call where I'm living, and it's my buddy from Toronto. And he's like, dude, I just wanted to let you know that for my Toronto police application, RCMP application, I put you down as a reference, a character reference. I said, okay, that's cool. Like, is there anything I need to know? Because I knew him for 3 years by that point. We were in the 4th year of knowing each other, and I'm like, is there anything that I need to know? Because from what I know of you, like, it's good stuff. Like, we worked hard in school, we partied, we had fun, but like, you know, like, you spent a lot of your time preparing yourself for this role in life. So that's cool. And I know your girlfriend well, and it's all good. He's like, no, I think we're good. I'm like, he's like, I think they're going to call you, because I got the vibe that they're looking into my application. I said, yeah, no problem. So it's like, keep me posted. I'm like, okay. So literally like a day or two later, I get a call from the RCMP, and it's like, it's one of those things where they leave a message, but they don't give you a number to call back. They're like, we'll call you back. And I'm like, this is ridiculous, because I'm literally in and out. Like, I'm constantly at school, because in teachers college, it was like, you go to school all day, and then you do assignments all night, and you try to hang out with your classmates and stuff. Like, it's not just you go home and you do nothing at night. You know what I mean? So they finally get a hold of me, because I remember they left a message. I called them back. I said, dude, they called me, but they didn't leave any return information. They just said they'll call me again. And he's freaking, right? Because this is his life. He wants to get a job as a police officer. So he's like, okay, well, when are you going to be home? I'm like, dude, I'm at school all day. I'm like, calm down. Don't worry. They'll find me. They're the RCMP, right?
Yeah.
So I finally get the call, and I'm there to answer it. And they're like, we need to meet with you. You're a character reference for this individual. We know you're in North Bay. How are we going to do this? I said, well, when do you want to meet? And they're like, well, we can meet kind of thing, like tomorrow at noon. I'm like, well, I'm going to be in class. And they say nothing. I'm like, okay, I'll let my teacher know I have to leave. So I'm like, okay, let's meet at Tim Hortons. And I tell them which one. And they're like, okay. And I said, how will I know who you are? And they're like, we'll come to you. Like, total cloak and dagger. We'll come to you. What are you going to be wearing? So I tell them, and for many years of my life, I wore this blue New York Mets baseball cap. I still have it somewhere, but I'm like, well, I'm an Arab dude. I'll be wearing a blue Mets hat. Like, I'll probably be the youngest guy in the Tim Hortons at noon, kind of thing.
That's true.
So they're like, okay. So I call my buddy. I tell him, he's pumped, right? He's like, okay, don't mess it up. I'm like, I'm just gonna answer their questions. Like, so I get to Tim. So the next day, I tell my prof, who's this really old crotchety lady teaching us language arts. And I tell her I need to leave at around 11:45. My friend, I tell her the whole story, and she's just looking at me like I didn't think she bought any of it. But I'm like, I gotta go. Like, he needs a reference. I'm his reference. It's not Mickey Mouse. I gotta go. She's like, okay, go. Not that she could stop me, but I wanted to show her that respect. Like, I gotta go. I gotta do this thing. I'll be back. So I go to Tim Hortons. I walk in. I look around. Nothing. So I sit down. And as I'm sitting, a couple minutes later, these two guys walk up to me, and they're wearing khakis and like a blazer. One of them had a big mustache, and they're like, "Are you Roland?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, we're so and so from the RCMP." I said, "Okay." And they're like, "We're just out here." I'm like, "Out where?" And they point to a van. And I'm like, and I said, and this was weird because I don't normally do this, but I said, "I'm not going to that van. Like, I need to see some identification." They're like, "Okay." So they pull out their wallets. They show me their badge, and there's like an identification card right above the badge. I'm like, "Okay." So I'm like, "Let's go." And that did not sit well with them. They got their backs up when I did that, because then they asked me for my identification, which they were probably going to do anyway because they need to know I am who I say I am. But I was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm not going to no van with two dudes I've never met before who are like, they were big dudes. I want to see who you are. I don't care what you're doing." So then, like, "Well, let's see your identification." They were a little, you could tell something shifted at that point. So we sit in the van. It's like I get in the back seat, and literally there's machines everywhere. They're sitting in the two front seats, and I'm right behind them. It was like a bench seat, and I was in the middle of the bench, and behind me was stuff, like surveillance stuff. So, like, "Do you know why you're here?" And they did like 5 minutes of runaround, right? Like, is this guy coherent? I'm like, "Listen, I'm in teachers college down the road. You probably already know that. I'm missing my class for this. I would do anything for my buddy. So can we just do this?" They're like, "Okay." So they just start asking the questions, and I start answering the questions. And a couple of questions they would repeat. Like, they were like, "Okay, tell us again." Then they'd ask the question, and I'd repeat the answer. And this is the only time where it got interesting. They said to me, "Has your friend ever smoked weed?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "In the 3 years I went to university with him, no, he never smoked weed that I know of." I said, "We drank, we had beers, we went to clubs and pubs, and we played video games in his basement, and we studied. Like, we studied hard because we wanted to do well." And they're like, "So you're telling us he doesn't smoke marijuana?" I said, "In the 3 years that I knew him, we never did that. I never saw him do that. I never heard him talk about doing stuff like that. My relationship was, we would study, we would do assignments together, we drink together, and we play video games together." And nothing. They're like, "Do you know his girlfriend?" I said, "Yeah." "What's her name?" So I tell them. They're like, "That's not her name." I said, "That's the name that was given to me for 3 years. That's what I called her, and she responded to it." And then we come to the end, and they've got paperwork and everything. Like, it was legit. Like, it was serious. We get to the end, and they basically say, like, "We know we were a little bit," and I'm like, "You guys were over the top." I'm like, they said, "We do this all the time. You'd be surprised how many character references are junk. Like, they don't know the person, or they're lying the whole time." And then they said to me, "Your friend told us in our interview, like in our pre-interview with him, he did smoke marijuana in high school." I said, "That's great." I said, "I don't know him from high school. I know him from university.
Mhm.
What I know is a stand-up dude who, like, came to my house. I don't let anybody in my house. He'd been to my house. He met my parents. Like, a really cool dude." And they're like, "Okay, well, thanks for your time," or whatever. And then I rushed back to class. And then as soon as I got home, I called him and I told him everything. And he's like, "They asked you the marijuana question, eh?" I'm like, "Yeah." Because, "What did you tell them?" I said, "You don't do marijuana from what I know. You don't do that stuff." He's like, "Yeah, I mean, I did it in high school." I told him that. And anyway, then he's like, "Toronto police called me. They want an interview." And then literally a week later, he's like, "I got in with Toronto police. That's going to be my life." And I'm like, "Right on, dude." They never called me. But that was my experience with the RCMP. And it's like, it's one of those weird experiences where, as a young impressionable individual with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, I didn't appreciate their tactic. I didn't appreciate the way they operated. But I mean, now that I look back on it, it's serious stuff, right? Because they're gonna hire someone to be placed anywhere in the country, maybe even out of the country, to do like law enforcement. And I guess I don't guess, that is a big deal. So that is my RCMP story.
That's good. That's a good one. I feel like we're moving into are we going to play it all with the theme of background checks? Like there's an interesting. Do you have the same method? For us, you have the declaration that you sign off on each year.
Yeah, it's online, and it just says it's just one question, like
have you been a good person?
Pretty much, and you check yes or no. What's interesting about that is when I did my police check for the whole hockey thing, that was interesting too. I had to fill out a form, go to the police station, and again, like it's getting hard. It's hard to defend the police to my kids. It's hard to tell my kids and any kid they're there to help you. But then when you go into the police station or you deal with them on the side, 99% of the time, they don't come off in a good way. I'm sorry. I'm saying it out loud. Like, they just don't. They come off kind of anal and kind of crusty. And it's like, do they have any training working with kids? Like, when they see a kid, will they dumb down how they're really feeling to like show the kid that they're community helpers? I don't know. It's starting to rub me the wrong way, and I'm pro police. I really am. But I went in there, it was really like crusty, and like they snapped too. Like I didn't have my ID out fast enough. Like, where's your identification? I'm gonna take it out of my back pocket. Like, can I have a second? And I'm looking behind me like, is there a line of people here? No. It just didn't make sense. Oh, you need to sign here. Okay, I'll sign there. Like, it just, now that you got me thinking about it, kind of crusty. And there are two police officer dads on my son's team, and they don't come off like that, but they're not at work, right? They're at hockey. So, we're just chatting, talking about life or whatever, but you got me thinking about that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because this podcast is not about that, but I just feel like I spend my days telling young people that they're helpers, and then you run into them and they're crusty. And I'm going to put it out there. I've not run into them in a negative, like I've not been doing anything wrong where they've approached me and they've said, like, we need to talk to you, you've done something wrong. It's just been like here and there, going in for police checks or whatever. They just seem crusty all the time. And I know that their work could lead them to that. I get that. But for goodness sake, like, save it for the criminals, right? I wasn't under suspicion, so why am I being treated in a crusty way? There's my rant. This podcast today could go in so many different directions. I don't even know what to do with this, because you and I could talk about social media again. We could talk about crushing it on social media. I don't know, Chris, what do you want to do? How do you want to, what avenue do you want to take today with this?
I don't know. Can I tell you a tuberculosis story?
Sure, let's throw that. I'm going to put this down. So I've got here police checks, and I've got tuberculosis. I'll make it quick, and then we'll figure out where we're going to go next. You just got me thinking so I'm still in that background check references kind of a mindset, and how my application to becoming a teacher was, it almost didn't, like, it really got bogged down. It got bogged down into the point where like deadlines were going to possibly be missed. And it's because when one of the things, I don't know if your school board does this, but my school board is that in order to get in as a teacher, you have to get a TB test, because you're going to be, that was mine. I had to get tested for TB, and along with the police check and, the vulnerable sectors check. And it came back as positive that I had been either exposed to, or I was carrying, I don't know, is it a virus, tuberculosis? I don't know. But I was a carrier, potentially, not sick, but potentially carrying. So
I had to go through an array of chest X-ray things, and it added an extra 2 weeks onto my application process. And I was thinking to myself, oh man, like this isn't going to happen. I'm not going to be able to close the deal waiting for the results. And that, you know, it's okay. It's for it to come down to the fact that I'm not actually sick. I just been exposed to it. And the backstory to that is, as I was trying to, I was like, because you have to have a fairly direct exposure to it, right? So when I was still working in the restaurants, there was, and I found this story out. So when I was transitioning out of the restaurant, when I gave my notice to the owners that I was going to be going to teachers college and that I would love to keep working for them part-time, which they ended up letting me do while I was in teachers college. It was convenient. I went to U of T. I went to Oise. The restaurant was right downtown, so I'd be doing school all day, fall asleep in the student commons, and then I'd get a little bit of work done, and then I'd take the subway down to Yonge and Queen, and I'd work that night, and then I'd go home, repeat while I was in teachers college. That was my life. And so in that time when I was transitioning out of there, my shifts were all over the place. There was a lot of stuff, kind of just a lot of different things that I was having a hard time kind of keeping all the pieces together. Living north of Toronto, it was a lot of stuff. So I wasn't really always in the most aware brain when I was at the restaurant or in teachers college. Stretched thin, basically. So, but I was still connected with some of the people when I was in the process to apply. So when I was when I got in and I'm talking to some of the staff, I was like, yeah, like, can you believe it? So I'm talking to friends at the restaurant. I'm like, I almost didn't get this application. Now I don't know if it was for teachers college or if it was for my actual job, but somewhere in that process, I had to be cleared. So I was talking to some staff at the restaurant, and they're like, well, you know, such and such staff member was off with TB. I was like, what? It's like, yeah, such and such staff member was off with TB. I was like, I had no clue. And this individual had been gone. And because I was, it must have been trying to get a job with the actual school board, because when I was at the restaurant, I wasn't sort of noticing all the staff that was or wasn't there anymore. I wasn't doing direct staffing anymore. I was just kind of running a lot of the more kitchen-based stuff, but I wasn't doing HR stuff anymore. So basically, I found out that one of the staff members had been on for like 6 months. Yeah, in and out of the hospital, sort of like got you know, what you would say is the classic tuberculosis, and it is likely that that's where I was exposed. But that's one of those weird, like, it's not really in the theme of background checks, but digging into the story as I'm saying, like, as I'm watching, have you ever had a TB test? So I've had to have two.
Probably.
Yeah, I've had to have two. One for a volunteer position that I did. And in both cases, the result is the same. So they put a little bit of liquid, they take a syringe and they put a little bit of liquid just underneath, usually on your forearm, just underneath the skin. And it creates like a little blister of this liquid. And then they say, come back and we'll check it in 24 hours. And what they're looking for is redness around it. And it's such a small reaction, but there is a reaction. It just looks like red, like a blister. It got a little bit more red. They're like, yeah, there it is. I'm like, it doesn't really, that's it? They're like, yeah, that's it. That's all the reaction you have to have. It looked like it had just been slightly abraded. Like there was nothing really drastic about it, but they're like, yeah, there's TB. You were exposed or you're still a carrier. I was mind blown. Second time around, they didn't make me go through the batch of, like, when I was for a volunteer position, they didn't make me go through the x-ray stuff because they had on file already, because I had been with the same doctor, that this had happened with my teacher's thing. So yeah, tuberculosis, dude. There's more to the story, but I'll give that another time. But that's how I'll close background checks.
Yes. All our listeners are gone now, so go for it and give us the TB story.
Where are they gone?
They checked out when we started talking about police checks.
They might have.
Like, what the?
Yeah. No, then, the backgrounder to the backgrounder. it's just gross. It would be better if we were both in restaurant work, because you'd kind of go, oh my God, like it's what, you know, one of those inside stories, you kind of go, oh yeah. But again, listeners will be like, what are these guys doing? Like, it's so off the rails at this point. How about crushing it? You want to do that? Do we want to do an extension off of crush?
What does it mean? What does it mean to crush it on social media?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I know for you, I mean, you definitely, I mean, you'd right. I'll just bring that back.
Whenever something good happens on Twitter, I just grab my fists and I just pound whatever table's near me, and I yell Hulk smash EDU. That's what I do.
I think I don't know. I think I have the same, I guess, kind of tolerance for that statement as I do for the sort of shake my head response I get when I think about the term edustars. You know, like I kind of I don't know. I don't really have anything. I feel nothing positive. Like if someone were to tell me, wow, Clough, you're just like crushing it on social media, I don't actually have much of an emotional response. I just kind of go, okay. Like I don't get glee, any sort of positivity from it. I get what they're saying. Like I get they're sort of suggesting like somehow my last few posts generated some conversation. Here's what I do think about it. I think that if someone is identified as crushing it, I don't know I don't know if it's a compliment that suggests reciprocity. It strikes me like it's a one note kind of, you were doing, not you were receiving, you were sharing, you were talking, you were kind of playing, you were back and forth. I think that often for me, my interpretation of saying someone is crushing it on social media, or let's say you're crushing it in your day, it's all about someone identifying your singular productivity, but it's not necessarily connecting with anybody. It's just an observation of mass or volume, not interconnectedness. So I guess starting with that type of a definition, that's, you know, my definition. What are your thoughts?
I like the way you put that. I like the way you put that. There's no comment about the interconnections or the impact that you may be having on others. I think from my perspective, when I hear people talk about crushing it, they're referring to things that are observable, like a tweet that gets like 100 retweets, or, you know, a bunch of likes, but there's no response. There's no back and forth. It's just somebody sees something and they keep flipping it. And I recently read a study that talks about that type of thing, like the power of when people see something that's been shared many times, they're more likely to share it because they feel like there's something happening here and they want to be part of that something that's happening there. They want to feel connected to it. So they just jump in and they do it. After having read that, I really think twice now before I reshare something. And it goes back to that thing I posted the other day about the why, to be intentional about, to really think about and understand why you're doing what you're doing, even if the answer is a negative one. Like even if your response to the why is a very shallow, or what you perceive as a shallow answer to the question, it's still making you aware. And so I wanted to throw that in there because sometimes people say, well, I just want to be liked. Some people might consider that a shallow response. That's not a shallow response. It's a need that you have, and you're trying to meet that need, and you're just going about doing it. But at least you'd understand that. And I think once you understand those things that are rattling in your head, you're better able to move forward, I believe, in a direction that's positive when you understand that. Anyway, long story short, you defined it well. I don't define it that way though. Like for me, someone who's crushing it on social media is someone who's engaging others in a meaningful way. And how do you measure that? For me, you measure that by responses, by interaction that you can actually see. And you and I were talking about this yesterday, and I'm going to bring it up now because for me it's a big deal. So I don't know if anybody really knows my mode of operation on Twitter, but I'm a big believer that I'm a big believer in following teachers. Like I do follow other types of people and stuff, but when teachers follow me, I follow them back. And when I follow teachers, it's great when they can follow me back because I truly believe that if part of my why is to help me become a better teacher by being linked to different people and different ideas and articles and resources that they may provide or put out there. And you and I were talking about some people on Twitter, and you got me thinking. And so I went digging deeper into some Twitter accounts, and I looked to see what value is this person bringing me. I initially followed them because they're a teacher. But when I went back, I started to see their practice or their lack of practice. And then I thought, I'm not going to follow this person. They don't bring me any value. And it was kind of like, if you could imagine the conflict that I was experiencing, because I was like, I like rules. And my rule is if they're a teacher, I'll follow them. But I had to go against my own rule because they're not crushing it. And that's fine. But people were saying this person's great, this person's great. So when I looked at this person's feed, I thought, well, what's great about this person? They're retweeting resources. Awesome. They're asking really good questions that get people thinking, but then they're not engaging with the responses to their question. So it got me thinking, well, why are they even asking the question if they're not participating in the response? And then I thought, okay, well, maybe this is just an isolated incident. So I kept looking, and I dug as deep as I could into this Twitter feed. I was like, this is, there's no value for me here. There's no back and forth. So I just said, okay, well, I'm leaving. Like, I'm not sticking around. So I left. I think I'm really having a hard time with this, and I'm not even sure why. This is how I've got some spare time on my hands that I can take my energy and dip it down this road. I feel like I'm not interested in any of that anymore. What I'm interested in are the good conversations, which then reminds me of a recent conversation me, you, Andrew Campbell, and Matthew Aldrich had about how Twitter's going down, how Twitter's very negative. My response is, what are you guys talking about? Like, I'm not seeing that. Sure, there's trolls and there's all kinds of negative stuff, but I just ignore it and focus on the good stuff. But a lot of you talk about the stuff that's bringing it down. We had a great back and forth about that, and I think people started jumping in because as they saw the thread grow, they thought, hey, something's going on here. Something more than the like button was going on there. Something more than the retweet button was going on there. There was an actual conversation, and some people jumped in. And that for me is crushing it. That for me is crushing it. So over the span of the 2 or 3 days that we were talking, the people that were participating in that conversation were crushing social media that day. And that's my definition, because when you go to their feed and you look at their work, you can see into them a little bit about what they are, who they're about, and why they're there. It's more than just retweeting stuff from edu celebrities. Another thing, the edu celebrities, I'm slowly letting them go too, because all my other friends are gonna retweet their stuff anyway. So I'm gonna see it, and I don't want to support it. If they're not gonna respond to people's questions or people's queries, I'm not interested. Sorry. And you know what? Maybe it'd be different if I had 40,000 followers, maybe. But at the moment, that's not the world I'm living in on social media. The world I'm living in is I'm trying to put out the stuff that's in my head, and I'm trying to connect with the people who can provide value. It sounds selfish, but it's not meant to be. If what I'm doing isn't doing anything for anybody else, then leave. Like, I don't need you to follow me. I don't need that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not why I'm there. I'm there for the conversations that we had the other day with Andrew Campbell and Matthew Aldridge. I'm there for the conversation. I can't remember the name of the teacher who's going to be starting her own podcast about women of color.
What was it? Emily Wong.
Emily Wong. I'm there for that. Like, when I saw that thread start,
that's a great bloom. That's why I kind of looked at that. Like, this is a so, props out to Emily. That's I guess, because I'm trying, it's so when, to drop this, I'm trying to sort of balance what was sort of messaging and what was open conversation. Because I had some sidebar messaging with her as well, just talking about, I offered some ideas about podcasting.
Let me jump in then, so that you don't throw anything out that maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. Basically, she tweeted, and you and two other people were linked. So I suspect that you are the 3 or 4 people that have been kind of consulting with her, or just like going deeper with the topic than other people. But she basically said, this is where I landed. And she'd written a blog post about where she had landed with her podcast, and she put it out there. So immediately I went right to the blog, and I read it, and then I responded to her tweet, and I was like, this is fantastic. And it was really funny too, because if you read my tweet, it could come off as like somebody trying to hang on, grab the coattails. That's not what I was doing. I read her post, and I was like, hey, this is good stuff. I think it's awesome that she has the topic she's chosen, and that she's chasing it. She wants to chase it. She wants it to grow, and she wants to elaborate. I love that. And, another little tidbit I gave her that was just me, all me, is she was saying, she's listening to podcasts, and she's trying to get a feel for people's style and how they do the work that they do. And my only message to her was, don't discount what you bring to the table, because what you're going to bring is going to be your thing. It's going to make you on your podcast, and awesome. Have fun. But it's those conversations, it's those threads that, for me, that's crushing it on social, because I've said this many times, I can't live a life. I can't hang out with all these people individually. I can't do it. It's not possible. Nor do I want to. And I might want to sneak that in after you speak about the social media and the real life divide. I feel I need to say something about that. I want to say something about that. But that's crushing it for me. So if you're a teacher and you have 7,000 followers, but you don't say anything, that's not crushing it for me. For me, that tells me, this is what it tells me, the metrics for that 7,000. You either you're a really popular person in real life, and so your friends and people just follow you, number one, because there is that. I don't think people talk about that enough. There are very charismatic people who have a following no matter where they go. So they end up online, their following follows them online. Like, they have something going on. And I don't want to take anything away from that. But what I'm saying is, or they've presented at conferences or whatever, and the people there automatically hitch on and stay. But for me, I look at the feed, and I'm like, does this person interact? Does this person do anything? Or is this person just retweeting stuff? Or is this person asking for advice and then gets 100 responses and doesn't say a word to anybody about those responses on the feed? Maybe behind closed doors, direct messages or whatever. And that's not going to do anything for me because I can't see those. But if you're just retweeting a bunch of stuff all the time, you're not doing anything for me. Like, sure, the resources are coming my way, but for me, it's a balance. It's do you provide opportunities for people to interact and for people to think deeply? Or are you just retweeting stuff all the time from other big names or whatever? Like, you and I have had this back and forth over the past 2 weeks. The big names, man, oh man, have they ever, I'm just done with that. I don't need to buy the book. I don't need to visit their site. I know what they're doing and I know how they're doing it. And I trust the people that are part of my circles that if they see something really awesome, then they'll float it my way. But I don't need Joe Doe to blow my way a retweet of something, him tweeting himself, quoting himself from a conference he did or a book that he wrote. I don't need that. That's not what I'm looking for. Maybe others are, and awesome. It's there if you want it, because I see it all the time. But if that's not what you're looking for, so I'm done following like that type of thing. I've had enough. It's not doing anything for me.
I was God, you got my brain going in so many different directions. I like the I find my social media use is shifting again. Still playing with how I consume. I like Matt Aldridge. He put out a piece on Medium, I don't know, last 2 days, talking about deep reading and kind of taking back our brains. I think there's some interesting space there as far as sort of recalibrating, but also recentering ourselves in our social media consumption, and sort of looking at how it's changing, how we like, it's not happenstance that we scroll. It's not happenstance that you stand in line and pull out your phone instead of saying hello to someone. It's not happenstance. This is all part of the digital design. And I like that there are people in my network that are starting to scrutinize that a little bit and kind of put it in a way that I kind of get it, that, you know, you are responsible for changing your own brain chemistry here and the wiring and what you're looking for in the social media space. And I like how some of my PLN are going there. I find it provocative and definitely reflective as far as how I'm using it. Back to Emily, I wondered for a moment, and this is one of those, so we can talk about the sort of like the silly side of posting the ego bait on Twitter, where you're just looking for someone to cuckoo you and say, oh, you know, you're all good, you'll be fine, you're doing the right thing, where you sort of looked for emotional support through your social media connections. But I'll flip it a little bit, and I wondered if it was overwhelming at all in the support that Emily was getting, because there were people that were jumping in and saying, not just, yeah, you can do this, high five. It was people like, I so want to help you get there with this. Like authentic, deep, real resources that were believing in what the seed of this idea. And I just wondered, I don't know, maybe she'll reach back out to one of us, but I wondered if it was, you know, what that's like. What's it like to receive that type of positive connectivity with an idea that you have, and people openly willing to help you accelerate it and get it into motion? That's got to be it's got to be a pretty cool feeling to sort of to have that you're developing something that sparks the joy, sparks the energy in other people.
It reminds me of when I started podcasting. It reminds me of the feeling of excitement. And
who did that for you? Who did that for you? Who was when you were sort of jumping in like that? Because I've said in the past, you were one of those people for me. Hurley was one of those people for me. Rod Neiser was one of those people for me. That sort of like, go for it. Just like, and here, what do you need? Here's everything you need. Who was somebody that kind of did that for you, kind of lift you?
For me, so there were several people in how I reached out to get things going. So if I can start early, because I see it in phases. So really early on, a gentleman named Michael Redfern, who was a high school teacher in my system and was also the technology consultant for, you know, a chunk of time before he retired. I remember being at a TEDx event in Kitchener, and Michael was talking to myself and another colleague. He was recording us, and I said, why are you recording our audio? And he said, because I'm gonna put it into a podcast. I remember, like, that was the first time that the word podcast hit me in a way that I paid attention to it. So Michael Redfern from the beginning he got things rolling without knowing that, and without me knowing either. So big shout out to Michael Redfern, who, like, I would say is one of my mentors, and he doesn't know that. There's a name for that, right? There's a mentor from afar. He doesn't know that he mentors me, but he does.
I feel like I want a better name for that. I like that idea, because I think that can happen more easily with active and structured social media use. Like, you can really get deep with some people, and unless you ever pause and say to the person, yo, you are really important to me, and I've never told you, but I'm going to tell you right now. Sometimes just the follows and the likes aren't enough. There aren't enough just to sort of let somebody know that they're developing your craft with you. So I feel like I want a better word than mentorship from afar. Feels like we need to, let's brand that.
That's your homework.
Yeah, let's brand that one. I want it to be as powerful as your Hulk smashes EDU.
And don't forget, it's Hulk, Hulck.
Yeah, I did get that part right. I forgot that.
I'm not saying you got it wrong. I'm just saying that's what's going to differentiate me, because I have to be different than everybody else.
Agreed. So keep going.
Okay. So Michael Redfern early on did something that got me moving in that direction. Then it was at the Google Teacher Academy that really exposed me to really what I consider creative people with that California vibe. There's something about the West Coast that is romanticized to me. Okay, so I have to throw that out there, full disclosure. But meeting some of these people, so when I considered, okay, I think I'm going to start a podcast, this is what I want to do. I mean, Stephen Hurley, Stephen Hurley's like an in between. Stephen's in between Michael and these other guys that I'm about to talk about, because Stephen was on the radio, and he got me on internet radio years ago, before any of the Google stuff. So, a big shout out to Hurley, who's influenced many people. So he was there, but he wasn't the person that was like helping me push forward the podcast. He was one of my first guests on my podcast. And he was like, dude, you're doing a podcast, we need to talk. And I'm like, right on, let's do this. So a big shout out to him too, because he influenced me with the whole audio radio thing, which built some of my capacity for the podcasting.
And that's where I found you, and that's where I found Hurley. So I like that you dropped that, because that was my seed point. So that was a important moment in my journey. Keep going.
So here's where the rubber hits the road type of deal. So now I'm thinking, okay, I want to do a podcast, but I don't know how to do it. Like, I don't know where to start, and I could read a bunch of stuff, but I'd rather talk to somebody. So that's where I hit Brian Briggs, who's a consultant in the United States, and he has a podcast called Check This Out with Ryan O'Donnell, who's another educator in the United States. I met Brian at the Teacher Academy. So I hit Brian up because I know he's got a podcast, and I'm like, man, I was throwing darts at him. Like, Brian, tell me this, tell me that. There was literally like days of just Twitter direct messages. Like, he's like, oh, dude, sorry, I was with my kid doing whatever. I'm like, it's all good. I'm just going to keep firing away. So Brian Briggs was instrumental in talking to me about the technical aspects of it. David Terrio, who also was at the Google Teacher Academy, high school language teacher in California. David doesn't know, but he is a big time mentor for me. And it's really awesome because he's not an elementary school teacher. He's a high school teacher, but he just does wicked stuff. And his perspective and his writing is it's just influential to me. It's like a wave, and it just overtakes me every time. And I don't like to wish that I was like other people, but I kind of wish that I could write like him. I kind of wish that I could create like him, just because I admire the way he does things. Anyway, so David Terrio, I reached out to him, and then he referred me to Bill Selak or Selak. I don't know how you say your last name, Bill, but Bill, I never met Bill. I've never met Bill. Bill is he's ed tech. He has his own podcast. Bill is I don't even know how to say it. Bill runs in those circles. circles with the Teacher Academy people and like ed tech, not ed tech the company, but educational technology. He runs in those circles with the computer users, computer using educators. He runs in those circles. He's part of those circles. He's influential there, and never met the guy before in my life, and offering me assistance like no problem. I didn't hit him as hard as I hit Brian just because I didn't know him. I'd never met him. But those are the three names that was what got me moving in the right direction. So Michael Redfern and Hurley planted a seed. And the radio thing has been in me a long time, and I could tell you more about that, but that's really early on. But Brian, Bill, and David, they got the ball rolling. Like, I went out and I bought my mic. Not this one, the other one. I bought my mic because Brian told me what to look for. I paid for my online subscription to hold my MP3s because Brian pushed me in that direction. I started dealing and playing with the software to manipulate the sounds and add music because Bill provided me with an idea. David was instrumental as like a contractor. Talk to this guy, talk to that guy. They have it. They can make it happen. They'll help you. And I'm grateful for that because it's done more than just allowed me. It's allowed me to reach out to people that I never met to talk about their life and their life's work. Number one, it's infiltrated my classroom where I started using it with my students and then seeing what it does to my students when they listen to what they had already said about an idea or about something they had done, and then have them recheck. Okay, are you still thinking this way? Because you were thinking like that when we recorded your audio when you were talking about this math concept. Do you still feel the same way about the math concept? What's changed? What's not changed? Like, it's really allowed them to dig deeper, and I appreciate that. It's led to you and I talking about this right now. Like, it's done so much for me. It's done more than I've ever been able to give back. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it was to give back, was to create content for people, because I had gotten to the point where I was just taking and not giving. And I felt like I needed to give, and that's how I was giving. So big shout out to Briggs, Selleck, Ontario, Redfern, Hurley. I mean, look at what Hurley's doing. Like, it's out of control, like the guy's retired, but he's got a full-time job with Voice Ed Radio, and he's constantly bringing people in the loop. And Emily, I suspect her podcast is part of the Voice Ed family. So, like, the pieces are there. It's just who's going to motivate you and who's going to help you get there is what a lot of people need. I know that I just didn't want to read articles off the net. I just didn't. And I had to. It got to the point where to publish my stuff, people couldn't help me because I wasn't doing it their way. So Brian told me how he was pushing out his content, and I thought, I don't want to do it like that. I don't like that. So then I found my own way. And I appreciate what you said about me kind of working with you. I remember you kind of reached out, and I was like, I think I was more than happy to assist. I don't think I was, well, you can tell me. I don't know. I think you've got Chasing Squirrels. You're doing great work there. We're working together on this, so I think things went well that way. But tell me about your venture.
So it's funny. I had just the backstack to that is I had for a while been playing around with blogging. I think as soon as I started, actually what happened as soon as my daughter was born, I started to think about blogging, because I was originally thinking about putting together a dad blog, and I have some bits and pieces of that, but it never came together. It didn't capture me. And then I forget, it was somewhere between having to put together a video for Teachers College and so a video for Teachers College about, I had to make a digital lesson. So the idea was, if I wasn't there, so it wasn't about creating a lot of content, it was about having a pocket digital lesson in case in case I was having a sick day. So suffering through making that, and then starting to teach. So these are all kind of like the little fires before it kind of consumed me. And then when I started to teach, I was involved in something where I wanted to put together, I was doing, I think, sound effects. I was helping out in the drama department, and I started playing around with GarageBand in capturing audio, and it didn't hook me. I did it, but it didn't hook me. It didn't work. It didn't do anything other than it was just a task that I did for somebody else. It didn't feel like I was doing anything for me. And then, yeah, so teach. And then I think it was me becoming interested just in podcasts in general. And I really do wish I could isolate the moment that I started to listen to podcasts. I think there was some connectivity between something happened with a conversation with my dad, and we were talking about writing. He, became a writer when after he left the bank. And I had always I'd been sort of writing bits and pieces ever since high school. And there was something in there where I'm having just a vague memory of him mentioning that he had listened to a speaker. He had listened to a speaker about writing, and this was through the writers, I never remember what the acronym is, but it's basically a writers community of York Region or something like that. And he had said, check it out. There's some good stuff about storytelling there. So I had started to listen to some of those casts. And then that was the rabbit hole that led me to just other casts. And then jumping on Twitter, you have these parallel universes, and you start to see how some things talk to each other. And then I think that's where I came across you. I don't know how you got on my radar in the first place, though. Like, it's how I kind of made those fence jumps between writing, being a teacher, and then all of a sudden you appeared on there. I really don't know, but that was all the salad that was kind of in there. And what was awesome was by the time I met you, and this is maybe the mix, just the ideal mix. By the time I had met you, there were elements already at play that were kind of, I felt, lead to where we are right now. I'd already messed with the tech, kind of understood storytelling, enjoyed communicating those stories. I didn't know what that would be. I didn't have any concept of what I was looking for until becoming a teacher, and then meeting other individuals that are talking about EDU in a way that I found addictive and interesting. And then coming across your podcast, talking to Hurley, and that offer that he mentioned in the podcast about the Canadian Educators Association thing. So what worked was the fact that you created an opportunity and you're willing to chat with me. And from the moment that you and I first made contact, I still didn't release my first episode until January. So you and I made a connection back in the September. It was still 4 months out where I was still trying to figure out the pieces that would become podcast. So still refining my use of GarageBand, checking out where I was, like you said, the host server, making the connection with iTunes, figuring out what I would even ask, and then sort of connecting and trying to find guests. So that, and you were entirely, I think what was nice is you found the conversations. I hope the questions I was asking were balanced between sort of naivete and beginner, but I always found like you brought it back to, you did what your group did to you. You're like, here's what I'm doing. Here's how I'm doing it. You're welcome to it. You redirected me to a few online resources. You said that you blog about it. I checked that out. And then you do what you want to do. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to go mess with it some more. So I felt like you were responsive, but also sensitive to the fact that whatever, from the point that I made contact with you about doing this, that I wasn't developing your product. You just kind of stood a little bit that line and let me develop mine, like the thing that I wanted to put out, which I think is really cool about mentorship. If you can sort of see that, if you can sort of see that line that you shouldn't step over, because the person doing it has to suffer and do it a little bit themselves.
I love that. I love that part about not pushing your own product onto somebody else in a way. And being a mentor, there's I try when someone asks me a question about, hey, this is my situation, how should I deal with this? I always tell them, well, here's like when you tell me your situation or whatever, here's what I would do and why I would do it this way. And it's not like you need to go and do it like that. It's unless it's one of those things where no, you need to go talk to the principal right now. Like, that's not my opinion. That's, you need to go talk to the principal right now because what you're telling me sounds like something in their wheelhouse. But this business of like giving people a formula that's the same as yours so that what they're doing is the same thing you're doing, and then you can kind of receive something from that, is just so, like, that gets under my skin. So I'm happy to hear that I was able to answer your questions and kind of provide you with direction, but that, like, you needed to do your own thing. It reminds me of the mentorship that I'm kind of in the middle of working on with a teacher in my board right now. He'll ask me, like, he'll send me stuff. He'll say, what do you think of this? And I'll read it over and say, I really like this. Can you tell me more about this portion, why you'd say that, or why are you feeling that's important? And this other thing might not be as important. It's never about like how I do it. It's everybody has something to bring to the table, right? It's like that comment I made to Emily. Don't discount what you're bringing with you. We all have something to bring. We all have something to give. It might be a matter of building enough confidence to be able to provide what you have. You need something to stand on, right? And for me, it was the point of, no, I'm doing this. This is my idea. This is why I want to cast. So I'm just going to do it. And I didn't have the confidence. I just did it, right? But it was good people at the beginning of my journey that helped me, knowing that I was flat-footed. For example, Peter Skillen, Sylvia Duckworth, Michelle Cordy. They were, my first podcast guests. And I told them, I don't know what I'm doing, but here's my idea, and this is why I want to talk to you. And so we've given a shout out to the people who helped get me to podcast, but now I feel like I need to shout out to those early people who dealt with me knowing that I didn't know what I was doing. And, when I say those names now, I have this feeling of friendship. Like, I consider Peter a friend. I consider Michelle a friend. I consider Sylvia a friend. And, I love it. I love that camaraderie. Sylvia was just getting going with her sketchnoting at that time. It was starting to grow real fast, and she made time for me. Michelle was in the middle of doing keynotes. I think she had just come back from ISTE, and she had done a keynote at ISTE. She was tired, and she still made time for me. Peter Skillen is always out there grinding in the EDU world and the EdTech world, and he gave me his time. And again, I go back to that. I'm so appreciative that these people gave me their time. And so I'm loving the way that this has turned out, because as we're talking about our journeys, it reminds me of how important these people are. And so, what I'll do today is I'll probably reach out to them and just say, hey, I was talking about you today. I hope you're well, and just leave it at that. But that's the beauty of this stuff, right? That's the beauty of the social media, because that's where I met these people before I met them in real life, at conferences or at ministry activities. And my life and my educational world is richer because of them. And the people that I've gotten to talk to on my podcast, they've all impacted me in a particular way. And you and I have talked about this. When people ask me, what was your favorite episode? That's a really hard question. They were all good for different reasons. And that's the collection in my mind. When I think of the 54 guests I got to talk to before I let go, all of them brought something to the table that I really wanted to hear about. And think of how powerful that is. That's a documented 54 people, 53, I think, because I did Hurley twice. 53 humans that have impacted me, and it's documented, right? Like, that's the other thing too. There was the blog. I blogged about it. I put out the audio. For me, I'm happy that I did that because it's all there for anybody else to see, for people to go to. So yeah, it's that confidence. It's that confidence. I don't want to be telling people how to do something. I'll tell them what I did and why I did it, but then they got to figure out their own way. And that's the hard part. Some people don't want that. There have been times where I've said to people, just tell me how to do it. They look at me funny, and when they give me the funny look, that's when I know I stepped over the line. That's when I know that, okay, if this is really important to me, whatever this is, I need to put in the time. I need to put in the work. That one word for 2019, that gimmick kills me, but I jumped in anyway, and that's my word, is work. But it's been my word forever. It's not new. Anything you want to consider my success, I don't even like using that word. The things that I've done that I'm proud of have all come from putting in the work. I don't know if we've ever talked about that. I don't see myself as having like a natural talent or a natural gift. I guess my gift would be that if I want something bad enough, I just put in the effort, I put in the work, I make the sacrifices. But that's not something that's just on me. That's like a life thing. If people are willing to put in the time, the sacrifice to work hard, then they'll probably get what it is that they're going after. But anything that I've done that's worthy of like pride or something that brings me joy has come from putting in the work. And even in my classroom, when I ask people for the quick fix, they give it to me. It's the quick fix only works for a couple of weeks and it's gone. It's no good to me. It's not worth anything to me because I haven't put anything into it. And that's why me blogging about becoming a better math teacher is working. And I think it's because I put it out there. Like I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I need to become. And slowly, I think I'm moving in that direction. But it's a lot of work and it's stressful in that I'm teaching kids, right? Like it's not just my learning that's impacted, it's kids' learning that's impacted. And that's a big deal. I want to make sure when I go to them that I can stand behind what I'm doing. And sometimes I don't feel that way when I'm teaching numeracy. And that's hard because I can't just stop teaching numeracy. But I'm putting the work in and I'm getting feedback from my numeracy coach that I'm moving in the right direction, that the kids are doing things that we would expect them to do or that we want them to do at this point in their learning career. So it's funny how all this is interconnected if you just stop and think about it. There's lots of connections. It's quite circular. And now you've got me running. The list is running through my head today. When I take my son to hockey, I can step away from all the other parents for 10 minutes and I can send out some messages while I wait for the game to start and let people know that they've made a positive impact and that I just felt like reaching out and letting them know and thanking them for that.
Andrew Campbell would appreciate that statement. Everything's interconnected. He's dropped that a couple times as the bug bomb in some of the Twitter conversations when people get too polarized. He kind of brings it back to that statement. And I think it's a good sort of mindful type of post when things tend to sort of get too wide in the bandwidth, trying to get back to that middle line again. Let's close up. But I want to bring you back to you landed quickly on that idea of being connected, but also making the choice to be not connected, and why the digital sphere, can provide that opportunity for you. And you've shaped this out a couple of times, but today you use the words, something to the effect of, I don't necessarily want to. So you're sort of kind of touching on your needs and how you sort of perceive your best use of your time and social media to, I guess, develop your craft, develop yourself. Do you remember what you were thinking? Because you made a reference, like I want to get back to that, about how you use social media and why you sort of use the social media the way that you do.
So I think that I can't interact with some of the minds that I'm exposed to on a day-to-day basis. Like I can't, call Andrew Campbell and say, let's go down the street for a drink. There's so many layers to that, right? Like my home life, my work life, it doesn't work. And so for me, Twitter in particular is a place where I can go to directly connect with these people that get me thinking in a way that I really like, right? Like they get me thinking. Sometimes the thinking's uncomfortable. They have me reflecting on like my values and my beliefs. What do I really believe and why do I believe it? And am I willing to stick by what I believe and why I believe it? And so I really, what's the word? I can't find the word, but when I see something, when I see like somebody poses a question or a thought, it gets me going. And that's what I'm looking for, that interaction, but I'm not looking for the commitment of becoming someone's buddy. And your question has led me to be able to throw in, I know we want to shut it down, what I wanted to hit on earlier with the social media versus the in real life connections. And this is perfect. There are a lot of people that I follow on social media and that follow me that might not want to talk to me in real life, right? And this has been an evolution for me. This has been an evolution for me because many years ago, earlier on in the social media days, I was at a park with my family and my kids were playing in the park, and I saw a lady that we were friends on Facebook. And I said, "Hey, how's it going?" Which is rare for me. I took a risk there, and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And she gave me a look like surprise. And then I left it alone because I could tell it was not a good situation. I was there with my family. She was there with her family. We had a mutual friend, so we became friends because of the mutual friend. And when I did that, I stepped over a line, and it was early in my social media understanding. So I just felt like her and I had gone back and forth about kids and stuff. And I saw her, I'm like, "Hey, how are you?" And there was like a freeze. And I was like, "Uh-oh, okay, I went back to my corner. She was doing her thing. And I remember saying to my wife, that person, like I just said hello and she didn't say anything, like she doesn't know me, but we've been talking about the kids and stuff for a long time. Anyway, and I was bothered by that. And I think I said something on Facebook like, "Hey, if you're not going to talk to me in real life, then maybe you shouldn't be my Facebook friend." And that's where I was at that time. And what ended up happening is she ended up leaving Facebook, because and I don't think it was that particular moment, but we've talked since then. It was, she wasn't prepared to be connecting with people in real life. It was just weird, which I totally understand. So she leaves Facebook because of that. Now, here's the funny story. My family goes on a Disney cruise. The elevator opens. We're on the elevator on the cruise ship. The elevator opens. Guess who walks onto the elevator with her family? That same person. Now, since
everything is interconnected. Everything is interconnected.
Now, here's the cool thing about that. We had already talked because she She then left full-time teaching to do supply teaching and do this business on the side. And I've seen her and stuff. We've talked about it since then. But she got on the elevator and we're like, hey, how's it going? We're on the same cruise. And it was one of those understandings like, let's talk now and then let's cruise. Like you go do your thing, I go do my thing. And it was, we saw them like 8,000 times in the restaurants and at the pool. And we just walked past each other like it was all good because we had already talked in the elevator. It was over, right? Now, fast forward to today. No, fast forward to maybe last year. I was at a board-wide thing, an activity, and I saw a teacher that I follow on Twitter. She follows me. And again, it was a moment where I looked up. I was sitting down and she was walking past me to go find a seat. And I said, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? And she looked at me. She's like, good. And she kept walking, which made me think, oh, I don't think she made the connection. I had spoken to her many times on Twitter, like a back and forth about whatever topic. And anyway, my reaction to that was not as heightened as my reaction many years ago to the Facebook thing. How I feel today was built on those moments in time. And this is how I feel today. If I see someone out in public that I follow on Twitter or follows me on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram, I may say, hey, what's up? Or I may not say anything at all. And I think at this moment in my life, that's fine. And and the same expectation goes out to them. If they want to say something to me, great. And if they don't, I understand because there is a divide. I will talk to certain people on social media that I probably won't talk to in real life for whatever reason, right? Like the creepiness factor or just the like shock factor because their brain might not work the same as mine. My brain works like we'll be out somewhere else, say to my wife, hey, see that person over there? That person's friends with so-and-so on Facebook. And Sarah's like, how do you know that? I'm like, because they made a comment and then I saw their picture and now it's up here now. It lives up here. And so I recognize them. That's their kid who's always causing problems. Like I recognize all that now, right? I get that. So I'm past that now. But for me, I don't need to say anything to you. If you want to say something to me, that's great. One more quick connection on that and then we can end it. Jay Wigmore, who works for Peel, I think. I'm not 100% sure. I was in Florida 2-3 years ago. We were in the airport waiting for our flight, and we're sitting in the lounge at the airport. We're eating before we get on our plane, and this dude with his family staring at me. And I couldn't place him. And I said to Sarah, is that guy staring at me or is it just me? She's like, no, he's staring at you. And so whatever, keep eating. And then I look over and I'm like, hey, man, how are you doing? He's like, good, rolling Chidiac, right? And I was like, yeah. He goes, Jay Wigmore. I was like, Jay? He goes, we're buddies on Twitter. And I was like, oh. And then he started giving me more information. I met him through Jonathan So, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, how are you doing? Did you have a good trip? And so we were chewing the fat there for, half an hour before we got on the same flight, bringing us back to Ontario. But I was appreciative of that. I was fine with him saying, hey, man, how are you doing? We interact online, real life. Here's my family. Here's your family. I was fine with that. But I'm also fine with that's Jay Wigmore, and I'm not going to say hi to him, and he's not going to say hi to me. I think I've evolved into a person that understands that some people don't want to mix the two, and sometimes I don't want to mix the two, and I'm good with that. That's where I'm at. And here's the thing I'm really good with. If you see me and I don't say hello and you find that offensive and then you stop following me, I'm okay with that too. Like I'm not going to lose sleep over that. I'm not going to be upset over that. I'm going to be like, that's how the world works. And I wasn't ill-intentioned. I just didn't feel comfortable saying hello to you for whatever reason, just like you might not feel comfortable with me. It's all good. It happens. And that's kind of what I wanted to say about that. I don't know how you feel. I don't know if you want to throw your 2 cents in because I've just monopolized some of the time.
You know what? It's what I love is that you've broadened my operating system in using social media is that if I'm connecting with you online, I want to connect with you in real life. I really do. I have nobody that I follow that I think to myself, I wouldn't want to meet you at some point. There's nobody, and it's the way that I use it, the way that I look at it. I think it's the same same reason that when I first met you, I walked in and I threw on the hug, and I knew in doing that, I'm like, I'm doing something that's me. He's got a choice. He can sort of stiffen up. He can like not be that guy. That's his choice. Adult, make a choice. But I also recognize in how I use social, and I've mentioned this to you before, is like it also how it colors my use of social media, that I want to make sure that I'm representing something that if I get the chance to meet someone IRL, then they have some harmony between what they've experienced online and what they're experiencing right in front of them. What I love is that you've brought in my perspective to appreciate that there are people that don't share my huggy interest. And it's no biggie. It's not a thing. It's just that's how they're going to use social media, whether it's for entirely social purposes or if they are using it for professional learning. That to sort of use it in a way that is specific, and that here's how I am on social media. Here's how I use social media, and here's how I use my in real life interactions. That those are two separate spaces. I think that's a kind of a powerful observation. It was a powerful observation for me. I think fleshed out because I was able to get to know you more, and we've had sort of honest conversations about it as well, where there's no offense here. This is just how I do. This is how I use the social media, and I'll talk about it, but I'm going to keep using it this way. I'm going to keep doing it. So that was my thinking. And I think other people that, listen to the podcast or listen to you or I sort of talk about how we use social media, I think that's two sides of the same user that need to be represented. It also makes me wonder about how other people have dealt with that moment, and anybody out there that wants to throw us a note on this, but what does that moment look like for you, for people when they've actually, they're looking at someone, they're like, how do I have a memory of this person, but I can't place where the memory's from. And they're like, oh, right, it was from that Twitter chat on Monday night. Or, oh yeah, that's right. There's someone that you might know because you're a friend with someone that you might know. And I'm sure everybody at this point has some sort of a weird social media deja vu moment where they're not quite sure where they've met the person before. And it takes a little bit of a leap. You have to take a leap then to sort of like clarify that. What's that look like for some people when they've tried to clarify, where do I know you from? I know I've met you somewhere. Or do they step back and say, no, it's okay. I'll figure it out another time. That's what you had me thinking.
Awesome. That's it for this week, eh?
Yeah, we're good for Saturday. Bon chance on Monday.
Yeah, same to you.
Thank you.
I hope you have a good transition back.
It'd be great.
I'm looking to possibly do a short binary vlog for our site just on my week back, because I think it's an important. I think it might be. At the moment, it feels like it's an important. It's an important time in a teacher's school year. Right? Because I talked about the week before leaving and what that felt like and what my focus was on. And now maybe I'd like to, at this moment, I feel like I'd like to talk about what the week back is like for a teacher and what it feels like. I don't know. I'm really digging being able to document my experiences throughout the school year, the ones that feel like heightened to me, like I need to talk about because this is something people might not understand. But anyway, I thought I'd just throw that out there.
No, that's totally makes sense. And whether you've embraced it or not, your filmmaking skills are also, you're showing the development of your use of your digital tools, which is a whole other layer to this. Figuring out the camera angles and the titling and the editing and the adding of sound and just the lighting, all the other things that happen when you're really connected to your creative center, and I can see where you've gotten used to using some tools and then you're still introducing new elements. So your playfulness with it is showing in your development as well, which I think is critical. And what I love is you're putting out the product just for people to check it. Like you're not advertising professional videography here. You're saying like, here, check it. Here's what I put together.
Even then, I'm not even really telling anybody. It's just there.
Yeah, I know. But I'm saying that it is available. It's available, and people could sort of see, if they looked at some of your earlier videos, they would see a progression. So good stuff.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome, man.
Well, enjoy your last 2 days.
I know. I will. I will for sure. You as well. With this weather, I might have to go mow the lawn.
Hey, don't joke, because for me, it's either the lawnmower or the snowblower.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever works at the time.
Sure enough.
All right.
Chat you soon.
See ya.